Right. So, you know how we always dive into the most mind-boggling corners of science? Well, today we're going to tackle a really fundamental one.
Lay it on me.
It's about electrons. Or rather, it's about whether our understanding of them might be, well, a bit off.
Oh, this is intriguing already.
Right. So you send over this super thought-provoking article that really challenges this century-old idea of electrons as like these tiny physical particles.
Yeah, it definitely throws a wrench in the works, doesn't it?
Totally. And our mission today is to really unpack this whole concept.
Hmm.
We're going to explore this possibility that maybe, just maybe, electrical behavior and the way those electromagnetic waves are generated, it all comes down to vibrations happening inside atoms and how their charges spread out.
Okay, so right off the bat, we're talking about a potentially huge shift in perspective. I mean, the electron has been this bedrock concept in physics for so long, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like almost taken for granted. But what if we've been interpreting all these observations, all these experiments through a very specific lens? What if there's another way to understand what's actually happening at the tiniest level, the atomic level?
It makes you wonder if we're so used to seeing things a certain way that we might miss other possibilities.
Absolutely. So the article starts with this idea that atoms, well, they're not these perfectly balanced little things. Instead, they're constantly experiencing these shifts in their internal charge, kind of like a constant dance of energy.
This is more like a dynamic equilibrium, not a static one.
Right. And these what the article calls unbalanced atomic poles, they create these super tiny localized electric fields. So the question becomes like, is all this internal activity, is it enough to actually account for the effects of electricity? Like, do we even need to picture separate little particles zipping around to explain it?
That's a really profound question. I mean, it shifts the focus, doesn't it? Instead of looking at a discrete particle that's carrying the charge, we're considering this whole dynamic charge landscape within the atom itself.
Right. And that leads us to rethink how electricity actually works. Instead of picturing it as this flow of electrons like water in a pipe, maybe it's more like a chain reaction of these charge redistributions happening within atoms.
So voltage, in this view, becomes the trigger, right? It causes atoms to polarize, meaning their internal charge kind of leans in a certain direction. And then that polarization, it spreads, propagating energy throughout the material.
Yeah, exactly. I love how the article uses the analogy of people holding hands in a line. You push the first person and the force travels down the line without everyone having to move a ton.
Right, it's that idea of a wave propagating through the medium. And this theory suggests that electric current, it might be that same kind of a ripple effect happening within the atomic structure of the material.
Okay, so we've got these atoms constantly shifting their internal charge, becoming polarized. But this isn't a static thing, right? It's got to be dynamic. So wouldn't this naturally lead to some kind of vibrations, like at an atomic scale?
Exactly. The article argues that as atoms constantly adjust their internal charge distribution, they naturally start oscillating, and these tiny vibrations, they can actually propagate as waves through the material, and in doing so, they carry energy.
This is where it starts to get really mind-blowing. The article suggests that these atomic vibrations, the ones that come from those charge shifts we were talking about, they can actually generate the entire electromagnetic spectrum. It's like, whoa.
It's a big claim, right? But think about it. The intensity and the frequency of these vibrations, that's what determines whether we observe infrared, visible light, UV rays, or even X-rays. And the key here is that this is all happening through oscillating charge fields, not the movement of individual particles.
So instead of those little electrons zipping around and radiating energy, it's like each atom has this tiny little antenna, and the changing charge creates a ripple, a disturbance in the electromagnetic field.
That's a great way to visualize it. And when we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, this theory offers a pretty elegant explanation for where electromagnetic radiation comes from. It doesn't need those accelerating electrons that traditional physics relies on.
It really challenges the conventional narrative, doesn't it? And the article brings up this really interesting historical point. The idea of the electron, it was a super useful model for all these early experiments. But there's no direct proof, no actual observation of it being a physical particle.
We've built so much of modern physics on this concept, but it's important to remember that just because our mathematical models work really well, it doesn't automatically mean that the underlying reality is exactly as we've pictured it.
Totally. It's like our brains love to create these concrete images, but reality might be way more subtle and complex. And the article points out something else that's really important. Our instruments, even the super fancy ones, they don't actually see electrons directly.
Yeah, they're detecting the effects, right?
Yeah.
The changes in the charge, the way fields interact, the radiation that's emitted. But what this article is suggesting is that all those effects, they could be coming from this idea of atomic charge redistribution.
So even those classic experiments, the ones with cathode ray tubes, they might be showing us the propagation of these atomic polarization effects, not the movement of individual particles.
Right, it comes back to that distinction between observation and interpretation. This theory offers a different way to interpret all those classic experimental results, and it does it without needing the electron to be this separate, independent thing.
So to sum it all up, this deep dive into the article suggests that maybe, just maybe, everything we thought we knew about electrons and how they behave, well, it could be better understood by looking at atoms constantly shifting their charge, becoming polarized, and vibrating.
And if this alternative perspective starts to gain traction, the implications are huge. It could reshape our understanding of physics at the most fundamental level.
Yeah.
It could impact how we think about energy transmission, materials, science, even quantum mechanics.
It's like, what if we're just scratching the surface of understanding how the universe works? It makes you wonder how many other seemingly fundamental concepts in science are actually interpretations, not direct observations. It really opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
Thanks for joining me on this mind-bending deep dive.
My pleasure. This is why we do this.
Exactly. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.